Having already talked up the importance of bringing research and innovation agendas into alignment, this is where we get down to the nitty-gritty of how. We've lined up some illuminating alignment allies to get the practicalities. I'm hoping it will be as illuminating and as harmonious as that choir was yesterday, although that is a tall order to live up to. And we're going to start with a short overview from David Wilson, who is co-chair of ERAC, which according to Wikipedia stands for Enterprise Rent-A-Car, but which in this context, unless there has been a terrible, terrible mistake, is the European Research and Innovation Area Committee. David was telling me that that should technically, of course, be ERAIC, but they left out the I because they thought it would sound like earache otherwise. So not to give you earache, but to give you a few ideas, please welcome David Wilson, co-chair of ERAC.
Thank you very much. Just to introduce myself briefly, as well as being co-chair of ERAC, I'm also in the UK. I look after our interest in the main European Union research, innovation, and education programs. I'm not here talking in a kind of UK capacity, but since we're talking about joint programming, we're talking about alignment and things today. It is just worth noting that the UK is active in all 10 of the joint programming initiatives and in the strategic energy technology plan that we're going to be hearing about in this session. But my aim today is essentially to set the scene for the three showcase presentations that are going to follow. I'm going to briefly talk about a little bit of background, and I'm going to briefly talk a little bit about alignment. The European research area itself, for those of you, I think most people will be familiar with it, but if you're not, it has been around since the year 2000. Its overall idea is, in many ways, it's often described as being like a single market for research and for researchers. It's thinking about how Europe can be a unified area for research and researchers within itself, but also open to the world, thinking internationally, as we were hearing before the coffee break. Particularly relevant to what we're talking about today is the ERA roadmap, which was signed off in May this year by the Competitiveness Council. It's a document which sets out a number of priorities across the areas that are needed to really make the most of the potential of the European research area. It was signed off by all member states. It was also signed off by associated countries to the Horizon 2020. So it has a very wide currency, and what it is trying to do is identify a number of key areas where if we really focus on those and succeed in making progress on them, we will make the biggest difference to Europe as a single area for research and researchers. There are probably two absolutely key points that I think underlie the whole thing, two kind of key principles. One of them is actually a recognition that national research systems are different. That's not just because we have member states and associated countries, but also even within the member states, there are very wide variations in both in focus, in experience, in priorities. And that's, rather than that being a problem, that's something that we need to celebrate. That's something we need to work with. The issue, however, recognizing that they're different, is how can we make them work better together? Now, I think that's relevant to the roadmap, but I think it's also quite relevant to the theme of alignment that we're talking about this morning. Much more specifically, within that roadmap, one of the areas that it focuses on is about optimal transnational cooperation, and specifically on jointly addressing grand challenges. One of the priorities for the ERA roadmap is jointly addressing grand challenges. So it could hardly be more relevant to what we're talking about today. And within that, the thing that member states and associated countries decided was the thing that we needed to do most was improving alignment within and across the joint programming process and the resulting initiatives, and speeding up their implementation. So one of the things that all member states should be thinking about between now and 2020 is how can we make this more effective? And I think that's an important piece of background to what we're talking about today. There is already a kind of political commitment signed off by the Competitiveness Council to actually make that work better. Having given that general introduction about where this fits in the kind of the policy context, I think it's important also to talk about, well, what do we mean by alignment? The Minister touched a little bit on this earlier on. The official definition of it is alignment is the way member states modify their national programs, priorities or activities to bring them in line with joint research priorities in the context of joint programming in order to improve efficiency of investment in research at the level of member states and the era. I mean, I think that's fairly clear, but I also suspect that actually if you don't spend a lot of time in the sort of committees where this sort of thing is discussed, you may well be sort of thinking, what did he just say there? What does that actually mean? And I think it's important that as I think the Minister and the Commissioner mentioned, that we need to think about what does that actually mean in practice. And I think there are two things that I think that come to mind on that. One of them is that we need to think about alignment as a means to an end. It's not there for its own sake. It doesn't exist because alignment is in itself an intrinsic good. It is there to solve the challenges. And I think that's really important. It's not alignment is a good thing, but it's not an end in itself. It's a means to an end, and therefore it's actually really important to be clear. Second point: what are those ends that we're thinking about? Another way of putting it is, what is the problem we're trying to solve? A grand challenge isn't just an abstract noun like climate change. It's actually something much more specific. What is the problem we're trying to solve? And I think that there actually is the heart of the principle, because actually if we as individual countries are clear, well, what actually are the problems we've got, what are the problems we want to solve, then actually we are much better placed to think about, well, who else has got a similar problem? Can we work with them? How can we actually make this more effective? Now, I think the process of, I was already going to comment that the process of deciding what the problem is for us is not an easy one, but I think actually after hearing the Professor Jazanov's presentation before, I think I would have to kind of add, to multiply the reservations on that. It's not an easy thing to do, but nonetheless, it is being, at least thinking clearly about what is the problem we're trying to solve has to be the starting point, and thinking quite hard and in a systematic way, as we heard before the break. I think it's not. I mean, it's not my task here to kind of give a kind of set of programmatic statements about this. But I suppose the one comment I would make, having just made that observation about how do we explain what alignment is that actually an important theme, I think, for work has to be thinking about not just what is this, what are we familiar with in our policy making context, but actually how do we describe this in ways which bring it alive for wider society, for people in business and enterprise who need to work with us on all of these things. There is something about the fact that we need to take something that is properly described in a certain way in one context and explain it more clearly in a broader context. One of the ways in which I think that that can be done really clearly is by giving some really good case studies that show what is at stake. Which is what we are now just about to do. And I think that's important because I think the overall theme of the roadmap, as I was mentioning earlier, is that joint programming, that this process is actually one of the most promising tools we currently have, but we're not quite yet reaching its full potential. There is still a lot more that we can do to reach the potential of that. So what we are now going to think about is well, how can we do that? How can we make more of these opportunities? And what you're just about to hear in these see in these three showcases is actually examples of where that potential has been reached, where there is actually something really practical that people are thinking about, where they're engaging with issues, where they're bringing out some of the issues where you can really make a difference using this method. I think, having said that, that is a good point at which to stop and let the showcase examples speak for themselves. Thank you very much.